I had been walking for a long time before I noticed how carefully I was keeping my eyes down. The road was familiar enough. I knew its bends. I knew where the stone dipped and where dust gathered. My feet moved without thought, but my attention stayed close to my body, as if I were trying not to spill myself into the day. I remember feeling tired in a way that was not only in the muscles. It was the kind of tiredness that comes from too many ordinary days laid end to end, each one asking just enough of you that you do not complain, but never enough to feel finished. I had come toward the city because I needed to. That was all. No deeper reason, no anticipation. The air was already warm, not heavy yet, but promising to be. It rested on my shoulders and the back of my neck, settling into the places where effort likes to linger. Sweat darkened the cloth beneath my arms. Dust clung where it could. I adjusted the strap across my shoulder and kept walking. Jerusalem rose ahead in its usual way, pale stone against a brightening sky. From a distance it always looked calm, almost patient, as if it were holding its breath. I knew better. Cities are never still. They only learn how to hide their movement. As I drew closer, the sounds reached me before the people did. Not noise exactly, a gathering of voices that had lost their individual shapes. The kind of sound that tells you something is happening without telling you what. I felt it in my chest before I understood it with my mind. I slowed, not because I was afraid, but because something in me wanted to remain unentangled. Crowds have a way of making choices for you. I had learned that it is easier to arrive unnoticed than to leave. Still, the road carried me forward. The space narrowed. Bodies appeared where there should have been room. Some stood at the edge of the road, turned inward, their faces set with a seriousness that made me uneasy. Others looked away, as if their attention had already been spent. I remember thinking that I should have arrived earlier, or later, any time but this. The sun caught on metal ahead, a brief flash, then another. Soldiers. Their presence changed the air, not through force, but through certainty. They stood as if the ground itself belonged to them. I felt my shoulders tense before I realized why. I have never been comfortable near authority, not because I had done wrong, but because authority does not need wrongdoing to notice you. It only needs proximity. I shifted my weight and considered stepping aside, letting the moment pass me by, but the crowd pressed in behind me. There was no clean edge to slip away through now, only bodies and breath and the slow insistence of movement. I was closer than I intended to be. That is when I saw the wood. At first it was only the sound of it, a rough dragging, uneven, like something unwilling being pulled along stone. It made my teeth ache. The sound carried effort in it, strain, neglect. Then it came into view. The beam was large, larger than one man should have been asked to bear. Its surface was scarred and darkened, not smooth, not shaped for hands. It looked heavy in the way things become heavy when they have already been carried too far. And beneath it, a man. He moved slowly, each step measured, as if his body needed to be convinced to keep going. His back was bent, his head lowered. The wood rested against him without mercy. I felt something tighten low in my chest. Not pity. Not yet. Recognition, perhaps. The sight of someone doing more than his body could sustain, not out of choice, but because stopping was not allowed. He stumbled. It was small, almost nothing, just a loss of rhythm. But the beam lurched, struck the stone, and the sound cut through everything else. The crowd fell quiet in a way that felt practiced. In that silence, I lifted my eyes fully. I saw his face then, if only briefly. There was blood at his brow. Sweat ran freely now, tracing lines through dust. His eyes were open, unfocused, turned downward, as if the ground were the only thing he trusted not to move. What unsettled me was not the pain I could see. It was the restraint. His suffering did not reach outward. It did not ask for the crowd. It stayed close to him, contained, endured. That kind of suffering is harder to look at. It offers no relief. I became aware of my breathing again. Too shallow, too fast. I forced it slower, though I did not know why. Perhaps I wanted to appear calm. Perhaps I needed to be. The soldiers moved closer to him now. A word was spoken, a gesture made. The beam scraped forward again, and suddenly I was aware of how visible I was. I had not meant to be close, but the crowd had shaped itself around the moment, and I stood near the road's center, empty-handed, strong enough to be noticed. I felt eyes pass over me, measuring. I told myself not to meet them. I told myself to lower my gaze, to step back, to let someone else be nearer. My body did not listen. It remained where it was, as if rooted by something I could not name. The sun climbed higher. Heat gathered. Dust settled briefly, then rose again. The man took another step, then another. Each one looked harder than the last. I felt a strange resistance inside me then, not to him, to what the moment might ask of me. I thought of the life waiting beyond this road, of familiar walls, familiar hands, the quiet comfort of not being involved. All of it felt suddenly fragile, as if it depended on me remaining unnoticed for just a little longer. The space between us closed further. I could hear his breath now, short, controlled, present. I could smell the dust and iron and sweat that surrounded him. The reality of his nearness pressed in on me. I wanted to step back. I did not. Something in me understood before anything was said that the day was no longer unfolding around me. It was turning toward me. And I stood there, still unchosen, still free, feeling the weight of that freedom grow heavier with every step he took. I did not yet know what would be placed upon my shoulders, only that the road had brought me here for reasons I had not chosen, and it was no longer offering me the comfort of distance. I felt it before it happened. That subtle shift in the air when attention settles, when movement hesitates, when something invisible begins to narrow its focus. I had felt it before in smaller ways, on market days when a dispute drew a ring of watchers, or when a voice rose too sharply in a quiet place. This was heavier than that, more deliberate. The soldiers' voices dropped, not softer, just closer. Short words, clipped, exchanged between them as they looked not at the man beneath the beam, but outward, at the crowd, at us, at me. I became aware of my own posture, of how I stood upright without intending to. My shoulders were squared, my hands were empty. I was not pressed against anyone, not bent by age or burden. I was simply there, close enough, visible enough. I remember a strange, almost childish thought passing through me. If I do not move, perhaps they will not see me. But stillness can draw more attention than motion. I learned that too late. A soldier stepped toward the road's edge and pointed, not wildly, not angrily, just a brief extension of the hand like marking an object. "You," he said. The word landed cleanly. No hesitation, no doubt. For a heartbeat, I looked behind me, not because I believed he meant someone else, but because some part of me hoped the world might rearrange itself if I gave it the chance. It did not. The eyes around me had already shifted away, relieved. The space at my back closed. The soldier's gaze did not move. I felt heat rise in my face, a tightening in my chest that made my breath catch. My first instinct was to speak, though I did not know what I would say, that I had come from the fields, that I had done nothing, that I was only passing through. None of that mattered. He stepped closer. I could smell leather and metal, sweat trapped beneath armor. The scent of someone who belonged here, who would leave this place unchanged. Carry it, he said, not a request, not an explanation, a decision already made. I shook my head once, small, almost involuntary. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. The words I had gathered along the road scattered before they could form. The beam lay where it had fallen, angled awkwardly across the stone. Up close, it was worse than it had looked from a distance. The wood was rough, splintered, stained dark where hands and blood and time had pressed into it. It looked less like a tool and more like something abandoned too often. I took an unconscious step back. The soldier's hand found my shoulder. It was firm, not cruel, certain, the kind of touch that carries no doubt about what will happen next. The pressure drove the breath from my lungs in a quiet rush. Now, he said. The man beneath the beam had not looked up. He stood there, bent slightly forward, breathing in careful measures, as if he were gathering himself for another attempt. The wood rested against him still, heavy and unrelenting. I remember being acutely aware of time in that moment, of how everything seemed to pause just long enough for me to understand that whatever happened next would not be undone. That the road behind me, the morning I had been having, the quiet intentions I had carried into the city were already receding. I stepped forward. The beam was colder than I expected when my hands touched it. Not cold like stone, but like something that had been held too long by pain. The splinters bit into my palms. I adjusted my grip, then adjusted again, trying to find a place where it would not tear skin. Lift, the soldier said. I bent my knees and took the weight. It came unevenly, pulling me off balance as soon as it left the ground. The beam was heavier than it looked, not just in mass, but in how it resisted being held. It did not settle. It fought gravity in its own awkward way. The strain shot up through my arms and into my shoulders. My back tightened. I sucked in a breath through my teeth and steadied myself. Beside me, the man straightened slightly as the weight shifted away from him. For the first time, our eyes met. It was brief, barely a moment, but it settled into me with a weight of its own. There was no relief in his gaze, no gratitude, no apology, only awareness, a quiet acknowledgement of proximity, as if he saw me not as a solution, but as a companion for the next stretch of road. Then he looked ahead again. The soldier stepped back. Another gave a short command. The movement resumed. Go. And so we did. The beam rested across my shoulder now, biting through cloth into muscle. I adjusted my stance, trying to distribute the weight, but there was no comfortable way to carry it. Every step required attention. Every shift sent a fresh pulse of strain through my body. The road felt different beneath my feet, not changed, but sharper. Each uneven stone announced itself. I had to watch where I stepped now, not out of caution, but necessity. A stumble would not only be mine. The crowd moved with us. Some drew closer, curiosity overtaking restraint. Others fell back, their interest satisfied now that the burden had found a new bearer. I could feel eyes on me, weighing, judging, forgetting. I had become part of the procession. The man walked beside me, close enough that I could hear his breath. It was steadier now, though still labored. Each exhale carried effort in it. Each inhale seemed measured, chosen. We did not speak. There was nothing to say. I became aware of small things instead. The way sweat ran down my spine, collecting at my waist, the ache blooming where the beam pressed hardest, the rhythm of our steps, unspoken but shared. At one point, he stumbled again. This time, I felt it immediately, a sudden shift in weight, a tug that pulled me forward. I tightened my grip and leaned into the beam, taking more of the load without thinking. The movement surprised me, not because it was kind, but because it was instinctive. My body had already decided something my mind had not yet named. We regained our balance and continued. The road stretched on, longer than it had any right to be. The sun climbed higher. The heat thickened. My arms trembled now with sustained effort. I could feel my strength being spent, slowly but steadily, and beneath that physical strain another awareness took shape. I was no longer asking how to leave this moment. I was asking how to remain steady within it. The interruption had already done its work. The ordinary distance I kept between myself and the suffering of others was gone, replaced by proximity, by shared movement, by the undeniable fact of another's breath matching my own. I did not know where the road would end. I only knew that it had claimed me, not through force alone, but through the simple, irrevocable act of placing weight into my hands and asking me to walk. The longer I carried it, the less I thought about setting it down. That surprised me. At first, every part of me had been measuring distance, how far until the soldiers would release me, how much longer my arms could hold, how many steps remained before something would change. But time has a way of reshaping intention. The body adapts, the mind narrows. Eventually, the only question left is how to take the next step without falling. The beam pressed deeper into my shoulder now. The cloth beneath it had twisted, offering little protection. Each movement rubbed the same place raw. I could feel the skin giving way, heat blooming there, sharp and insistent. I adjusted my grip again, though it made little difference. Pain settles when it realizes it will not be escaped. I stopped resisting it and let it be where it was. The road sloped upward, almost imperceptibly at first, just enough to demand more from my legs. My calves tightened, my breath shortened. I leaned forward without noticing, letting my body form itself around the burden. Beside me, the man walked on. I could feel his presence without looking. The space he occupied was unmistakable, close, steady, fragile and unyielding at the same time. His breath remained measured, though it trembled at the edges, as if each inhale were negotiated rather than taken freely. There was blood on the ground now, dark spots marking where he had stumbled before. I noticed them, not with alarm, but with a kind of quiet attention, the way one notices stones in a familiar path. The crowd thinned as we moved farther from the gate. Some people peeled away, their curiosity spent. Others lingered at a distance, unwilling to leave entirely, unwilling to come closer. Their voices softened. The world narrowed to the sound of our steps and the occasional command from behind. The beam creaked with movement. That sound worked its way into me. It felt older than the moment, older than the road beneath us. Each groan of wood seemed to carry a history I did not understand, only bore. My arms began to tremble, not violently, just enough to remind me that strength is not endless. I clenched my jaw and shifted the weight again, taking a fraction more onto my back. My shoulders burned. My hands had gone numb where splinters had pressed too long. I wondered briefly if this was how it would end, not with collapse, but with a slow failure of the body's smallest agreements, muscles releasing one by one, balance slipping, the ground rising up to meet me. The thought did not frighten me, it only made me more attentive. I shortened my steps, timed my breath more carefully, found a rhythm that belonged to the burden rather than to me. Carrying became less an act and more a condition. At some point, I realized I was no longer aware of the crowd at all. The road ahead was all I saw, the space immediately before my feet, the rise and fall of the ground, the slight sway of the beam with each step. Everything else had receded, as if the world had decided to give us room. The man faltered again. This time it was more than a stumble. His foot caught, his knee dipped. I felt the sudden shift in weight sharply, a pull that nearly tore the beam from my hands. My body reacted before thought. I stepped closer, bracing myself against him, letting the beam settle more fully onto me. For a moment we leaned into the same forward angle, two bodies aligned by necessity. I could feel the heat of him then, unmistakable. The dampness of sweat at his side, the slight tremor running through his frame. His breath hitched, then steadied again. He did not look at me, but something passed between us all the same. Not gratitude, not apology, recognition. The kind that comes when two people share a task that neither chose, but both now carry. We straightened together and moved on. The effort left me lightheaded. Spots flickered briefly at the edge of my vision. I focused harder, grounding myself in sensation, the scrape of wood against cloth, the press of my feet into stone, the weight bearing down, constant and demanding. I thought of my life before this morning, not in detail, just in shape. The familiar outlines of days that belonged to me, work done and finished, meals shared, evenings that closed gently, that life felt very far away now, not because it was gone, but because it no longer explained who I was in this moment. I was not who I had been when I set out on the road. I was someone carrying weight that did not belong to him, yet rested fully upon him all the same. The road grew steeper. Each step required intention now. My legs protested openly. My breath rasped louder than before. Sweat ran freely, blurring my vision. I could taste salt on my lips. The soldiers urged us forward with brief gestures, no longer speaking unless necessary. They seemed content now, their task simplified. The burden was moving again. That was enough. I wondered if they noticed how my steps had slowed to match his. Not out of instruction, out of necessity, out of something quieter. The beam felt heavier than before, not in weight, but in meaning, as if time itself were gathering in it, layering moment upon moment, memory upon memory. Each step added something unseen, something that could not be set down, even if the wood were taken from my hands. I felt strangely exposed. Not because people were watching, but because I could not pretend ignorance anymore. I was inside the suffering now, not as an observer, not as a passerby, but as someone whose body had been made part of it. The thought unsettled me. It also steadied me. There was a clarity in it that I had not expected, a narrowing of attention that stripped away excess. I did not need to understand why this was happening. I only needed to carry what had been given as fully as I could for as long as I could. The man's breathing grew more labored again. I adjusted my pace, slowing further, allowing him space to remain upright. The beam shifted, pressing more deeply into my shoulder. I welcomed the pain then. It anchored me. It reminded me that I was still capable of holding. The road ahead curved slightly. I could not see where it led, only that it continued. And as we moved toward that unseen end, The weight on my shoulder began to feel less like an interruption and more like a truth I had been avoiding. That some burdens are not chosen, they arrive, they settle, and once they do, they ask not whether you understand them, but whether you will remain present beneath their weight. I walked on, breath by breath, step by step, carrying what I could not set down, aware now that the weight was no longer only on my shoulder. It had entered me, and it was not finished. The road seemed quieter then, not empty, just hushed as if sound itself had learned to stay back. Even the soldiers' footsteps felt less insistent, their presence reduced to a pressure behind us rather than a force pushing us forward. I noticed how close we were walking now, not brushing against each other, not touching, but near enough that our movements had begun to answer one another. When he slowed, I slowed. When I adjusted my grip, he shifted his balance. We were no longer two separate efforts moving in the same direction. We had become a single motion with two bodies inside it. That awareness unsettled me more than the weight ever had. Carrying the beam was a task. Nearness was not. I could feel the warmth of him beside me. Not the heat of exertion alone, but the steady presence of a living body enduring. His breath reached me in small bursts, each one measured, as if he were choosing to stay, rather than being carried forward by habit. At one point, he faltered again. This time I was ready. Before the beam could tilt too far, before his knee could give, I leaned in, tightening my grip, drawing the weight fully onto myself for a few steps. The effort sent a sharp pain through my shoulder and down my arm, but I did not pull away. He steadied. I felt the moment pass through us, brief and wordless. He did not look at me. I did not look at him, but something settled between us all the same, quiet and unmistakable. Trust, not declared, not requested, simply given. We continued on like that, close and deliberate. I became aware of how the crowd had changed its distance from us. Those who remained did not press in as before. They followed more loosely now, their voices low, their movements cautious. It was as if the space around us had become fragile, not to be disturbed. The road curved again, and for a moment the sun shifted its angle, falling directly across his face. I saw it clearly then. The lines drawn by pain, the exhaustion held carefully in check, the bruising, the blood dried and fresh both, layered like time itself, and beneath it all an expression that did not retreat from what was happening. He was present. That struck me harder than anything else. He was not enduring blindly. He was not lost to pain. He was there inside each step, each breath, fully aware of the road and the cost of walking it. I felt exposed by that awareness. Something in me wanted to look away, to return to the safety of watching only the ground ahead, but I did not. I held his presence as I held the beam, with effort and care. Our steps fell into a deeper rhythm, not the rhythm of efficiency, but of patience. We were not trying to finish quickly. We were trying to remain upright. The difference mattered. The weight on my shoulder no longer felt like an intrusion. It felt shared. Not because he had taken it back, but because he had allowed me into the carrying of it, into the closeness of his struggle, into the quiet dignity of continuing despite the cost. I realized then that I had stopped thinking about myself. Not entirely, but enough that the constant inner measuring had fallen away. I was no longer asking how much longer I could last. I was asking how to stay steady so he could. That shift was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it changed everything. The pain in my shoulder was still there. My arm still trembled, my breath still labored. None of that had eased. And yet something beneath the strain had softened. The effort felt purposeful now, not meaningful in a way I could explain, but aligned. As if my body had found its place inside the moment rather than fighting against it. I noticed the sound of his breathing again. It had slowed slightly. Not because the road had grown easier, but because the burden had been redistributed, if only by degrees. The beam rested more fully on me now, and I accepted that without resistance. We passed a small rise where the ground leveled briefly. In that stretch, our steps aligned so perfectly that it felt as if we were being carried by something other than our own strength. The sensation lasted only a moment, but it stayed with me. Nearness does that. It reveals how much of what we carry alone could be borne differently if someone were close enough to share the movement, even if the weight remains. I did not think these thoughts in words then. They came as sensation, as steadiness, as a quiet warmth beneath fatigue. The soldiers urged us forward again, though their voices sounded distant now, as if they were speaking from another place entirely. Their commands mattered less than the unspoken agreement forming between us. Stay upright. Keep moving. Do not let this break either of us before the road ends. I felt a strange gratitude then, not for the pain, not for the burden, but for the nearness itself, for the fact that in the middle of something so heavy I was not alone in the movement. He stumbled once more, lightly this time. I tightened my grip, leaned in, and felt him recover without stopping. The beam remained steady. Our steps continued. He exhaled slowly. I matched it. And in that shared breath, I understood something without naming it. That being close to suffering changes you, not by teaching you anything new, but by stripping away the distance that keeps you safe from seeing clearly. I walked on beside him, no longer measuring myself against the weight, no longer wishing for the road to end quickly, only attentive now, only present, only near. And that nearness, more than the beam on my shoulder, felt like the true weight I was being asked to carry. The road did not end the way I imagined it would. There was no clear threshold, no sudden widening, no moment when everything resolved itself into certainty. It simply continued until it didn't, and by the time I realized we had arrived where we were meant to arrive, my body had already begun to slow. The ground leveled, the beam shifted in my hands as movement faltered. Voices gathered again at the edges, cautious and subdued, as if the crowd sensed that whatever came next did not belong to them. The soldiers stepped in closer. Their presence returned, firmer now, reclaiming the space they had allowed to loosen. A hand reached for the beam. Fingers closed around the wood near mine. I felt the weight begin to transfer away from my shoulder. I did not let go immediately, not because I was told not to, not because I wanted to hold on, but because my body had learned the shape of the burden, and releasing it required intention. When I finally loosened my grip, my hands trembled. The absence of weight was almost as startling as its presence had been. My shoulder burned where the beam had rested. The air felt strangely light, as if something essential had been removed along with the wood. I stepped back. The man was guided forward again. The beam returned to its place upon him. He stood for a moment, gathering himself, breathing carefully, the road's work not yet finished for him. Our eyes met once more. There was no time for anything to pass between us then, no recognition beyond what had already been shared. The moment had done its work. Words would have diminished it. Then he was led on. I remained where I was. The crowd began to shift around me, reforming itself as crowds do, filling the spaces left behind by what has moved on. Some people spoke now, their voices tentative, uncertain. Others turned away, already folding the moment into memory, into story, into something distant enough to carry. I did not move. My legs felt unsteady, not from exhaustion alone, but from the sudden lack of purpose. For so long, every step had been necessary. Every movement had answered a demand. Now, nothing was required of me. The stillness was disorienting. I became aware of my breathing again, deep and uneven, of the ache spreading through my shoulder and down my arm, of the grit on my skin, the stiffness in my back, the raw places on my hands where the wood had pressed too long. All of it was real. None of it asked anything more from me. I stepped aside then, slowly, letting others pass. No one stopped me. No one spoke to me. To them, I was already becoming indistinct, another face returning to its place in the world. That was fine. I found a low stone near the edge of the road and sat. The stone was warm from the sun. It grounded me. I rested my hands on my knees and let my shoulders sag forward, releasing what they could. The road lay open before me now, stretching back toward the life I had left that morning. It looked the same dust, the same bends, the same light. And yet I knew without question that walking it would not feel the same beneath my feet. Something had shifted, not outwardly, but inwardly, in the way weight settles differently after being carried. I did not feel proud. I did not feel chosen. I felt quiet, a quiet that did not empty me, but filled the space where resistance had been. A quiet that did not erase the image of him walking on, bent beneath the beam once more, but held it gently, without needing to resolve it. I thought of my life again, of work waiting to be done, of voices familiar to me, of ordinary evenings and predictable mornings. None of it felt small. None of it felt diminished. It simply felt closer, as if the distance between what mattered and what was merely endured had narrowed. I rose when my legs felt steady enough. Each movement reminded me of the weight that had been there. My shoulder protested as I straightened. My hands stung slightly when I flexed them. These sensations did not trouble me. They anchored me. Pain fades. Memory does not. I began to walk away from the road where he had gone, not because I wished to leave him behind, but because there was nothing more I could do by standing still. Staying would not deepen what had already taken root. With each step, the city sounds returned. Voices, footsteps, the distant call of merchants. Life continuing as it always does, even in the shadow of things that do not resolve cleanly. I did not hurry. I let the road set my pace. There was a strange gentleness in me now, one I did not remember carrying before. Not softness exactly, but patience. A willingness to remain with things as they are, without needing to step away or look ahead too quickly. The image of him stayed with me. Not as a scene replaying itself, but as a presence, a weight remembered in the body, a nearness that did not fade with distance. I understood then that some encounters do not ask to be revisited, they ask to be lived from. I reached the edge of the city and passed through without notice. No one stopped me. No one knew what had rested on my shoulder that day. That was also fine. What mattered had already settled. It moved with me now, not as a burden, but as a quiet orientation, a way of standing closer to the weight others carry, a way of remaining present, when it would be easier to step back. I did not know how this would shape the days ahead. I only knew that when I placed my feet on the road again, whether toward work or home or rest, I would feel the memory of that weight guiding my balance, and that was enough. The day did not close with answers. It closed with steadiness. And as I walked on, unremarkable and unchanged in the eyes of the world, I carried with me the quiet certainty that staying present beneath another's weight had altered the way my own life would rest upon me from that day forward. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely.